Hello, security pros, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on today's ESA Government Insider webinar, Pursuit of Protection, a discussion with Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks into the perilous passage of school security legislation. I'm Hannah Boone, ESA's Marketing Director, and I'm excited to lead this webinar here today. Before we dive in, I'd like to provide some tips for those of you joining us on your first ESA webinar. First of all, welcome. You will be muted for the duration of this session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If a question or comment comes to mind at any point during today's session, please click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and I'll ensure that we save some time for your questions with our experts here today. We will also be recording this webinar so you can rewatch the on-demand session and share it with your colleagues. Tomorrow, you will receive an email thanking you for your attendance today, along with a link to the recording. We at ESA realize that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time here with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jake Bronger, our VP of Advocacy and Public Affairs.
All right. Thanks so much, Hannah. I'll just give everyone a quick little update. So they are currently voting in Congress right now, and they will for about the next 12 minutes. But we're told at any moment the Congresswoman would be able to jump on and join us. I want to, in the meantime, I want to give everyone kind of a quick update about some government relations issues that ESA has been working on. One, or top of mind at the moment, has been the right to repair. Right to repair legislation has been introduced in the state of Pennsylvania that we have gotten involved with. If you are based in Pennsylvania or operate within that state, we strongly encourage you to join our campaign calling for an exemption in that legislation. Additionally, right to repair legislation in Oregon as of course, as many of you know, has passed this legislative session, and we are working to come back for next session and introduce an exemption there. Thankfully, ESA's board of directors was able to come together and agree that we should hire a lobbying team to do so, and we are working with industry allies to introduce legislation to take a look at what we can do in the state of Oregon to better serve our members there. And of course, we'll be looking at that issue across the country in Washington State as well. We know that it was introduced. It did not kind of go the distance, so to speak, this year, but Washington, similar to Oregon in their legislative practices, will no doubt be introducing it again next year. But thankfully, we do have a lot of states that do have clear-cut exemption language in them. New York passed it. California, Colorado passed it this session with an exemption included. Many states are introducing the legislation with industry exemptions already included in the initial drafts of the bill, which is obviously great to see. And of course, Minnesota, another state kind of in more of that progressive blue line, they introduced a right to repair last year and passed it, but included an industry exemption as well. We're going to be talking, of course, a little bit more about school security today. And the Congresswoman actually introduced the Securing Our Schools Act of 2024. So I encourage you all, when she's able to join us here, submit your questions in the comments. Hannah will be happy to read them because we want to make it as interactive as possible, as always. And so I appreciate you making some time today and joining us. We'll get started here as soon as the Congresswoman is able to join. Let's see. All right. Well, as we wait, I'll also mention that we had the opportunity to join the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Most recently, they had a conference in Dallas where I was able to go and present in front of the life safety section that ESA is a member of and speak to them about the concerns we have with right to repair. Similarly to a lot of our members, they were not as familiar with that issue initially. They see the same kind of concerns that we have with that. They don't want a lot of false alarms or perhaps even worse, alarm signals that don't get sent in the end due to faulty repairs. So we're hopeful that they can lend some assistance to our efforts as well. I'll be joining the International Association of Police Chiefs in October, where they will be having a conference in Boston to speak with them about the same issue. Okay. Well, and as you all know, in case you didn't already know, I should say, there's a presidential debate tonight with a new candidate for the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris, current vice president, will be debating former President Donald Trump for the first time. Currently, it's the only one scheduled with muted microphones. Um, you know, I'll be obviously watching, mostly because I'm a political nut, but I think it'll be very interesting to see the new approaches to a debate style. The muted microphones was actually pressed and pushed for by the Biden campaign in the original debate, and it seemed to perhaps backfire a little bit during that last debate. In this upcoming debate, the Harris campaign actually requested that they not mute the microphones after a statement. However, the Trump campaign did not accept that, and so they reverted back to muting microphones. So, yeah. Potentially, the theory is that we would be able to focus a little bit more on policy instead of kind of after talk after points are made. But it'll be interesting because obviously during the last presidential debate, a lot of focus was made on the candidates' kind of their statements and their perhaps their mannerisms, kind of in a quieter setting that took place. Let's see. Oh, and I have a call coming through from the Congresswoman's team. Congresswoman, how are you?
I've had better days and I've had worse days. So
uh, well, thanks so much for joining us. So we already kind of did the housekeeping stuff, and I welcomed our guests in. So I'll just jump right into the introduction of you and to kind of let our folks know. So, and to give you a little bit of a briefing, the Electronic Security Association, we're an international association with members all across the country and into Canada and some other countries as well. So our membership is going to be all over the country on this one. But of course, myself. I'll let everyone know that I'm a fellow Iowan like the Congresswoman is. I'm based in Des Moines, Iowa. Jake Bronger, and you all know me as ESA's Vice President of Advocacy and Public Affairs. We're glad you could make some time for us today. For this episode, we're talking about school security legislation with Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks, who represents Iowa's 1st District. And as I mentioned, as an Iowan, I can personally vouch for the Congresswoman as being one of the hardest fighters in the political arena today. In 2008, 2010, and 2014, not to give you painful reminders, Congresswoman, but you did challenge incumbent Congressman Dave Loebsack and came up a little bit short. And then she ran and served Iowans in the state Senate and was successful in 2018 in winning the District 41 seat there. In 2020, she ran again for Congress and defeated former state senator Rita Hart by 6 votes, flipping the 2nd congressional district and resulting in one of the closest races in 100 years. Let me give you a quick background on Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks' bio, besides her electoral history. Her father was a master sergeant in the United States Air Force and who was forced to take up some extra work, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs to support their family. Her mother, who did not have a high school education, also worked multiple jobs. Congresswoman originally dreamed of becoming a teacher because she loved school and wanted to share her passion for learning with others. However, in the 10th grade, she was severely burned in a kitchen fire. While at the hospital, the Congresswoman was treated by a physical therapist who went out of her way to make sure she got better. This woman's kindness and selflessness inspired her to become a doctor so she could help others. The Congresswoman was the 4th of 8 children, and since her parents did not have the means to pay for college, she left home at 16 and enrolled in community college. She later enlisted in the United States Army at 18, where she served for 24 years as a private nurse and doctor, ophthalmologist, or eye diseases and surgery. She went into private practice in Ottumwa in 1997, and she has remained there with her husband, Kurt. The Congresswoman has 2 grown children, Jonathan and Taylor, and in 2010, Governor Terry Branstad of Iowa appointed her as the director of Iowa Department of Public Health, where she served until 2014. So, Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks, thank you so much for joining us. And maybe we just lost you for a moment.
Oh, am I back?
Okay, I can still hear you.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Well, good to be with you. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I know it's an unusual bio, but at any rate, I think what I've done has uh, perpetuated me to be tenacious, giving my family background, and persistent in going off after things that matter. And so um, sometimes I wonder if, you all always have to live with the results of your choices. And the past couple of weeks in Congress sometimes leads us to believe we can't get anything done, but I'm going to remain hopeful that we can get some things done. The legislation we're talking about, the work that you all do in both technology and security systems, extraordinarily important. I benefit from those, especially after receiving death threats late last year. So I think, you're in a very important sector and segment, which leads us to, one of the things that we're talking about today, which is HR 7357, and that's school security. And as we know, there are a variety of bills on school security. And it's interesting that just recently we had another unfortunate school shooting in Georgia. I was just talking with Representative Mike Collins about it. It was in his district. And I think it just brings back up, two incidences have recently happened. One was that school shooting. And then contrary to my staff's opinion that I just troll X all day long, I don't, but I happened to come across an article in one of the Iowa, internet sites, the newspaper's internet sites, about a mother who got into a fight with students at a school, and the mother was let in a side door at the school by somebody else. And so to me, that really brought up and emphasized what we were putting forward in the bill that we did on school security. And so I'm thinking, Jake, that you might have some questions. So, with that as an intro, I think I'm going to turn it over to you if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and thanks again so much for making a little time for us. I know you just got done voting and trying to get Congress to work. But so the Securing Our Schools Act of 2024, you introduced it earlier this year, and as you talked about, your political history explains kind of your tenacity. This is not the first time you've tried to introduce legislation to increase school security. What is it about this issue that caused you to get involved?
Well, first and foremost, I had kids in school. I'm hoping now with my daughter being married that I'll have grandchildren soon. And it's not the same school system that I went to. I mean, it was not unusual. My dad was enlisted military. We traveled all around the country. I lived in the South. I lived in the North. I've lived in, the East Coast, and then I was in the military. But it wasn't unusual when I was growing up for, in high school, people to come to school with, a rifle or a shotgun, in the back window of their pickup truck. That was not unusual or common. And we've been gun owners for a very long time, but we didn't have school shootings like we have now. And so as I was looking at what are, as a supporter of the Second Amendment, what is it that I can do? What legislation can I put forward that will help protect kids in schools? And so as I looked at how do I balance the constitutional right that we have, how do I balance that with the very strong desire to protect children? And I have the youngest of the 8 kids. My youngest sister happens to live in Connecticut and lived there at the time of Sandy Hook and has 3 children. They weren't, she didn't have children at the time of Sandy Hook, but now does. And so it's a very real issue when you're exposed to people who have had to go through this tremendous tragedy, communities, parents, family members. And so as I looked at how can I balance these two desires, these two passions, one to keep kids safe and to have a learning environment that's conducive to learning so they don't feel like they're in a prison. But how can I also continue to support the Second Amendment and not infringe on that? And so as I looked at what was common among school shootings, so we actually did that. We went back to all the school shootings, how they were done, what happened, how someone got into the school, were there warnings before that. We went through all of that and we found some common themes. And one was people entering in, as we know in Uvalde entered in through a side door that was left ajar. So there were people entering into schools that shouldn't have been there, and or they were students. So as we looked at that, we decided that one of the things we could do is make sure that, number one, people can't get in classrooms that don't belong in classrooms. Number two, that people cannot get into school that don't belong in the schools. And then number three, you want to have a window outside to the hallway so teachers can see, or principals or counselors or whatever, but you don't want to be able to have firing into a classroom. And so that's really basically how we came up with the idea and the proposal. And then we had to find a way to pay for it. And there is a lot of unused money out there that we wanted to capture some of that unused money. So it's common sense to me that everybody goes through a single entrance. If you're a large school and you want to have multiple entrances, then they need to be monitored. They need to be manned. So no one comes into the school without somebody knowing. Doors, you can exit, but you cannot enter. So once you're in the classroom, unless that teacher is letting you to exit, you can't exit. Windows should have bulletproof glass. So all of these things, and then security officers. There were, whether they're off duty, but having some training. Schools used to have that. And then there was a movement to not have officers in schools. And so schools were doing away with their support officers. So we thought that those were very common sense measures. They were constitutionally driven. And it's not something that's a cost that you have to do year over year. So it's not a repetitive cost structure that you're looking at. It's putting the structure in place, and then that guidance for any new school that would build, that guidance would be put into place for new school construction. So that's really how we came about it. And I think they're common sense measures. We're going to continue to push to get it done, even though I'm no longer on education and workforce or education and labor. But they're common sense measures that I think would absolutely help protect kids.
Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate that, because obviously the audience is very sympathetic to that, because I'll tell you a little about our efforts over the last 2 years. We've come out to DC twice with DC Hill Days, and we've asked Congress to pass one of these several school security bills, and a lot of them, you're right, have focused on utilizing the COVID-19 dollars that went to the school districts to allow those school districts to improve school security systems. I think every single meeting that I had on the Republican side, Democrat side, House side, Senate side, everyone said they loved it. Bills have not moved at all. Congresswoman, on this call, we have some people that work in government relations with some of our more national members, but we also have some smaller businesses as well. Can you kind of explain to us what is the hesitancy to get this done? I mean, every time we talk to our elected officials about it, they love it, and then we don't hear from them about it.
Unlike state government, I will tell you the 2 years I spent as a state senator, I'm going to say were more enjoyable than my time in Congress. And I think it's a service to our nation when people serve in elected office in any capacity. But it was simpler to do things in state government than it is to do things in Congress. And so you have, number one, a chairman of a committee, regardless of who is in charge, because the last time we introduced it, the Democrats had a majority. This time the Republicans have a majority. So through both Congresses, we haven't been able to get it through. And so there's the priorities of leadership. There's priorities of the chairs of committee or subcommittees. And so it's just trying to push those things forward. With Republicans, there's always a consideration for the budget. But as I said, there is unused money there that could be, I think, put in place for something that is tremendously important. So I think this is very important for the safety of children. It is in the line with all of my principles and foundation. It's not expanding government. It's not a repetitive cost year after year. It's a one-time cost. And it maintains the constitutional rights of others. It doesn't infringe on anybody else's constitutional rights to do these things. And so from that standpoint, we just continue to push the issue until we make it a priority. So we shouldn't have to undergo another school shooting to put this in place when there are relatively simple things that could be done. And honestly, over the summer is the best time to put these kinds of things in place,
Mhm.
when students aren't in the school building. So I would just say Congress tends to be complex, and it tends to take, term after term until you finally get something over the finish line. So for your members and your small businesses, and again, this doesn't have to be a government office or department doing this. These are grants that can go out to have local small businesses put
Mhm.
in place, as long as we have the standards to be able to achieve this. And then there's new technology even that wasn't even available 4 years ago. There's newer technology that can be adapted and put in place as well.
Mhm.
So I would say continue to advocate, continue to push for it, and we'll continue to push for it as well too. It's unlikely, it's possible it could get put in the lame duck. So I would definitely not give up yet, even though we only have these 3 weeks before the election. But I wouldn't give up, because things can be added into the lame duck on bills that are bipartisan and that they know they're going to pass. So this is something that I'd continue to push and ask if it could be added to some other legislation.
Right. Well, you talked about a little bit of the kind of the political philosophy challenges, and I'll be honest. I don't subscribe to the senator's point of view, but there was a senator, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, that introduced Senate Bill 3214, Counseling Not Criminalization in Schools Act. As you point out, we're not trying to create a prison system in the school, and I think if you talk to any of our members, they'll explain to you that they don't have any intention of doing that either. I think when people hear these bills originally, they think it's like going through TSA at the airport to get into a school, and that's really not what a lot of our integrators do. As we pointed out when we go to Congress, we say just look up at the ceiling. You see a smoke detector, you see a fire alarm, you see maybe a panel, and the staff is always like, "Oh gosh, I'd never even seen that there," and I've been working here for 5 years. That's what we like to do. We like to protect you and give you that peace of mind that you don't even know we're there, but we are there when you need us. However, you have some on the other side of the aisle that believe uh, that it's surveillance equipment. I'm trying to use the exact language that they want to move funding away from the purchase and installation of surveillance equipment and to protect historically marginalized students. Now, that it did not. The bill hasn't gone anywhere yet, but it did pick up 7 Democratic co-sponsors, and I won't put you on the spot to say answer for your Democratic colleagues in the Senate. But do they have a point, or are we? Maybe am I correct in thinking that historically marginalized people probably need security as much as anyone?
Well, certainly marginalized people need security as much as anyone, and even perhaps more. So I think the way to determine that is to go back through all the school shootings, find out where they occur, what kind of communities they occurred in. And honestly, they can occur in any communities. In Connecticut, at one of the affluent schools, there was a stabbing, and it happened to occur after school hours, at a school sporting event, but nonetheless, it still occurred. And so I think it can occur regardless of, the numbers of, vulnerable, marginalized communities. But nonetheless, doesn't everybody deserve that opportunity? We do have counselors. We have record numbers and record amounts of money that are going into mental health, into counseling, into behavioral health. I passed a bill in state Senate in one session to allow schools to be a site of service for behavioral health and mental health treatment. This was before the pandemic. It was in 2019, 2020, so that children whose parents couldn't come pick them up, or parents wouldn't take them to their appointments, could get care at school through telehealth. They just had to have an established relationship. So why should one negate the other? Can't you do both? And don't we already do both? And I would say we do. And to me, this is like, and again, I'm not trying to be political here, but this is like, we're going to send a counselor instead of a police officer for a domestic violence event, a domestic occurrence, when we know already for police officers, that's the most riskiest place we can send them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you can do both of those things. I have also have a bill supporting a brain health room in schools. We've got several of those set up in Iowa. Dubuque was sort of the launching for this. And so children, middle schoolers, high schoolers can come into the brain health room. The room is always monitored. You can't go hang out for 3 or 4 hours. It's just for a short little rest. But if you're being bullied, if you just need to take a break, and what we're trying to do is to de-escalate things in classrooms and in schools. So I'm a sponsor of that as well too. So how does saying that you would like more counselors negate the fact that you can have security in schools that protect kids now?
Hmm. Congresswoman, as I mentioned, ESA is very proud to support your bill. We've pushed it several times, and Hannah is actually going to go ahead and put the link to in our chat, so our members here can also join the effort to support this issue. I want to talk about. I know you get asked a lot. What can we do to help kind of build some more momentum on it? And I know getting involved is something we always talk about. Sharing your voice and personalizing those messages. But can you maybe talk to us a little bit more about the follow-up. For example, I won't name names, but he's a colleague of yours in Iowa, and he said that we'll have to go without his support. I could not get his co-sponsorship on this bill. I know that narrows it down to 2, for you. But feel free to stop by his office and tell him, what are you doing? But what would you say when we kind of meet that initial resistance? Obviously, we know the staff has to keep their member efficient, and they do an excellent job. I always say, having briefly worked on the Hill, the hours that your staff puts in, any staffer, it's enormous, and they do the best they can. However, our members want to see progress. How would you recommend that they continue to communicate with the legislative staff to try and build that sense of urgency?
Well, first and foremost, continue to do what you're doing to get more members to sign on to the bills. And then second, see if you can get other allies. So look for local law enforcement in your areas, local law enforcement to sign on, talk to school boards, and see if you can get some of the educational institutions to support the bills as well. So if you have support through the educational institutions and from law enforcement on something, because those are both of the areas that are going to have to respond to these, then that might help push members into signing on. And then the other thing is looking for ways to find how we can pay for it. So, which is why we had to pay for in our bill, was that we want to make it easier for members to sign on. And I'll check with all the Iowa delegation to see if they're signed on. So we'll check with them again too.
Okay. No, I always I explain it to folks because ESA, our staff, is mostly remote, and so I always kind of describe it. I say, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Iowa. We use the Catholic guilt trip approach. Are you seriously going to not get involved? Is that how you? I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. So that's what I explained to the congressman when I followed up with him. Well, I'm going to invite our members to ask. I know, because we have limited time, to send in any questions that they might want to ask at this time, and I'll check in with Hannah to see if we have any questions as well.
Okay, it looks like we do have a few questions here. One question that we have is, Georgia recently experienced a tragic school shooting resulting in the death of 4 and additional people injured. Details are still coming to light, but have you learned anything more from that incident?
The only thing, I really haven't learned much more from the incident or about the young person's social media. I know that they've also charged the father, and so there may have been abuse within the family, but I'm not certain on those details. That certainly elevates it further beyond what we've seen in other school shootings. And so I think that there's more information to come out. So, and you want that information to help with prevention. But at the same point in time, as I already highlighted earlier, you had an incident which I read about in the Iowa press just 2 days ago, where it was not an Iowa school, but where a parent was allowed into a school. I don't know if it was their child or somebody else, and then got in a fight with students. That cannot happen. And so there needs to be repercussions and penalties, whether it's civil, whether it's criminal. But if, that's something that should be addressed, and those people should be arrested, not just because of fighting, but if you put in security measures in a school, you have to have everybody follow those security measures. So we know that a door was ajar in Uvalde,
Mhm.
and how did the shooter know that? And so that's not the case in the Georgia shooting, but I think we still have things to learn from the Georgia shooting. But to me, I think the security measures we're talking about in my bill would have helped prevent that shooting
Mhm.
or
Well,
from the deaths from the shooting.
I can say from our perspective, there's been some reporting from industry publications already about the utilization of panic alarms, and I know with Alyssa's law being passed in several states, that's become kind of a hot topic and something that we're certainly very proud to support. Where the teachers were able to press a button and it goes immediately
Yep.
to police. You know, it doesn't go right to the monitoring station, but it notifies the police there's an incident. You have to show up here immediately. And the sheriff's office actually did say that thankfully they were able to get the signal as fast as they did
Yeah.
because as you know, in an incident like this, it's seconds that matter.
Yeah.
You know, minutes can be too long. And so that's something that I think our industry uh, uh, is proud to do, is that we try and, you know, obviously prevent, but then shorten that response window as much as possible. You mentioned Uvalde. I mean, we have the technology now that, I mean, for example, at your own house, when you step out the door, you probably hear a door chime from your own home alarm.
Yeah.
You know, they can install these in schools to where the principal could sit at their desk and go, "Why do we have a door open in the back of the school that's not supposed to be?" And we also have things like dynamic mapping, utilizing schools in school cameras in hallways, so that if police did respond, the problem with Uvalde, at least from the first responders' perspective, was they didn't want, of course, walk right in front of the rifle. Well, what if the security system was able to tell them that where that the intruder entered and where they are most likely to be at in the
Yeah.
school to help them find out which way to best respond. So I appreciate you focusing on that with this legislation, is that uh, we don't have to, as you point out, you know, make it a prison or become Big Brother, but we can help first responders act quickly, and we can help the school district and the school themselves know who's entering, so they can kind of keep better tabs on the building itself and the property. I mean, we are involved with a group called the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, called PASS. And you know, they don't just start in the classroom. They start in the classroom, they go out to the building, the parking structure, the whole community. So there is a lot of research that's done already on this issue, and our members are only too happy to help offer their ideas for that. I want to see, is there any other
I only
questions?
have about a minute, so if we
Yes. I wanted to see if there's any other questions real quick before we move to wrap up.
Yeah, we just had one question. My congressman is very different politically than I, and I don't think he'll listen to what I say. Should I reach out to someone else?
I would still reach out to your congressman. Be polite, be nice, be respectful. Um, you know, as a physician and as a veteran, I reached out to my Congress people, even though they weren't the same party. You know, what you're promoting and what you're talking about is bipartisan. This is something all of us want to do. And if they want to talk about counseling and counselors and guidance, you can also say, you know, this is in addition to anything else that we would do. And there can be remote monitoring. This is information that the school itself can have and can track. And so, you know, I think don't, and certainly reach out to other people, but don't avoid going to your congressman just or woman just because they're the opposite party as you.
Right. Well, Congresswoman, I know we don't have time for another question, but Peggy has a great point because AI, of course, is a big issue in Congress.
Yes.
Our industry utilizes AI mostly, you know, in some facial recognition, but also just computing and response time. And they mentioned that utilizing AI software and cameras can help us detect threats outside the school building. So, as we always say to our elected officials, please keep us in mind when you guys are regulating any AI, because we do use some stuff to help keep everyone safe. But
Yeah, that's
Congresswoman,
actually my concern in Congress is that we overregulate AI and
Mhm.
we don't allow it to use its potential to help us. So great
Absolutely.
point.
Thank you. Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate your time so much today.
Thank
Is
you.
there anything you want to share with us as you wrap up?
Well, I appreciate all that you do and come see me. So we're going to still try to get this done.
All right. Thanks so much, Congresswoman. Well, everyone, that's our show for this September. Please go ahead and join our active campaign in the chat to help support this important legislation. And we'll hopefully get it a little bit closer to the finish line, and we'll see everyone else in November. Thanks again, Congresswoman, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care.